Hey guys, Matthew, and welcome to the second episode of Some Sad to Chat. In this episode, we're going to be going over the progress that we've made so far, as well as our filter. Now, this is a question I've been getting a ton, so there'll be a link to my Discord down in the description, and you can join that. And under the announcement channel, you can find the filter that I've been using. It's essentially an uber strict filter that was remade to be less strict, so added some stuff back onto it. And I also went ahead and made it manually so that it would show certain bases such as rings, imbued wands, and imperial claws, as rings can sell for 1C each in bulk, imperial claws and imbued wands for 3C each, and they sell quite well whenever you get bulk, because people who are recombinating them need literally hundreds and hundreds of them, so they'll sell very, very easily. And you know, it makes up for a nice little chunk of change when you're getting maybe 5 or 6 or so per map, 3C each. You know, it's an extra 20, 30, 40, sometimes up to 50C per map from just picking up those bases. So that's why we're doing that. Okay, next let's talk about how much we've played so far and how much money we've made so far. Now, the title of this episode is Knowledge is Power, because that is the name of the game when it comes to Path of Exile. And as I'll be showcasing here, that is absolutely the case. All right, so on the initial day, we made the character. We played for about 2 hours, just get a feel for the character, see how it felt, see if it could run the content. It could. It was pretty scuffed, but it worked. And then we dropped that ring, the fractured T1 life ring that I mentioned in yesterday's video, and that made us about 2 exalts, which was enough to basically upgrade our character slightly and go back into buying more mapping supplies. So that's exactly what we did. We upgraded to a Skin of the Lords for about 20C, and then we upgraded to a large cluster for about an exalt, and then a medium cluster for 30 or 50C or something like that. Right, I also went ahead and finally upgraded and to some pre-rolled flask, which are masochists, which is 6 charges gained. It's not quite flagellant, which is 7 gained, but it's a lot cheaper to get them pre-rolled. And I got the rolls that actually matter for me, so evasion, curses, armor, and crit. And yeah, this whole set of 4 flasks was probably about an X or a little over an X. Which is a very good investment considering how much power they actually give me, and they're all automatic now, which is really, really nice quality of life. Okay, next. Another thing you'll find in the description of this video is a string, which looks something like this, which is a regex for your actual sentinels. This was also provided by Nicholas. So this is going to allow you to find which sentinels that you're picking up in your maps have any sort of value. So you can go ahead and do that. And as you can see, it shows that the ones that are actually worth anything based on the rewards that they have. So this one, for example, is Sentinel reward, Divination, Scarabs, and these ones have, this one is Currency, this one is Sentinel, right? So all the ones that don't have anything, well, they're not going to be highlighted, which means you can kind of just delete them. Of course, if the base is good, then you'll want to keep it. But if the base is bad, then you'll want to just kind of throw it out, as it doesn't serve any real purpose, and you get a ton of these sentinels, way more than you'll ever need. It also hides all of the apex sentinels because we don't care about those. Or sorry, the apex, the yellow ones, anyways. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of that. Okay, now let's talk about those bases real quick. Like I was saying, they sell very well. Now, they're not going to make you insanely rich or anything, but they do add up. Now, on the official first day of the actual challenge, which was yesterday, I played for about 6 hours, so it was a bit of a shorter stream. So it made a total amount played to roughly somewhere around the 8 hours, starting from a single exalt. And looking at our excellence, it says that we are at 51.5x, and then of course we also have this ring, which I value to be around 4 or 5, not really 8x, but probably 4 or 5x. So let's just call it around 55x for a total of 8 hours played, which means that we've been making somewhere around the 6 to 7 exalts an hour. And trust me, this is not from the actual farming that we've been doing. Now, don't get me wrong, this strategy probably could get you 6x an hour, maybe probably even a lot more if you were doing it on a proper character, juicing your maps adequately, and also just running the maps a lot faster. I'm averaging somewhere around the 8 minutes per map, and this is just due to the fact that I'm playing a build which is not a particularly quick build for a strategy like this, right? Expeditions take a while to clear. You know, Harbingers can take a while to clear. Essences can take a while to clear, as my damage isn't that high, of course, right? So basically, it's just a question of not having enough damage to really clear this content super efficiently, but it's still going okay. Now, from this 55x, essentially there was 10x that was from a craft, 22x that was from another craft, and the rest was actually farmed. So in the 8 hours that I've actually played, I've farmed 23x if we were to not consider any sort of crafting related stuff. And of course, I'll talk about that in a minute. So, you know, if we divide that by 8, you'll see that we've been making about 3x an hour, which is not all that bad considering, of course, the build is extremely cheap. We're at a point where the build is still under the 2 exalt mark for everything, including the gems, the cluster, everything else, right? So that's kind of where we're at right now. Okay, so let's talk about why this episode is called Knowledge is Power and what actually made us, you know, that much currency to where we are going from basically 3x an hour to almost 7x an hour from actual, you know, non-farming, if you will. And it all comes down to recombinators. Now, there's a lot of these items that drop in these maps, especially due to the altars and also due to the expeditions, that can give you bases that are very, very valuable to actually recombinate. Now, of course, this is the sort of situation where you need to know about these things, which is why I'm telling you, right? So here's an example here. In this case, I dropped this Black Maw Talisman. Now, this is a reward from Expedition, where, and you can see this talisman here had +1 to level of all skills. That was actually what was on the talisman, right? So I went ahead and price checked the talisman, and I saw that it was worth about an exalt. So an exalt at that point where I had about probably 20 or so X worth of value on the character, or sorry, on the net worth, if you will. I was like, well, you know what? It's not great, but it's not bad. Like, I could sell it and cash out an exalt, and that would be good, but I could also kind of try to gamble it and make it into a non-corrupted base. And if I make it into a non-corrupted base, that 50-50 alone will essentially double the value, right? If it had +1 on a non-corrupted base, because this is a talisman, so it's corrupted, it will automatically be double the value, but I have to 50-50 it. So looking at it, I have a 50% chance to double my money, or a 50% chance to lose all my money, and my money is 1x, and the double value is 2x. So 50% chance to lose it all, 50% to double it. That's not good odds. That means that on average, you should just sell it for 1 exalt, because on average, you're going to, if you win, make the same amount of money on average, and of course, if you lose, you're going to lose it. That's bad. But the thing is, you can go further, and instead of just recombinate it, which is a random base to try to get, you know, +1 on a non-corrupted base, you go a step further and recombinate it with a decent base and actually make a lot more. So what I did is I looked for an amulet that had +1 level of all physical gem with some life, and you could see that they were, you know, a little bit too expensive to what I was willing to risk, because if I was risking 130C plus the 1 exalt, at that point I was risking, you know, quite a bit of money. And there's no guarantee there. So instead, I dropped down the life a little bit, and you can see that I found an amulet for 10 chaos, right? So I paid 10 chaos for this amulet. It was a 60 life amulet, which is about a T3 roll, if I remember correctly, which is not awful. It's not great, with the +1 physical and open prefix. So this was a very good deal, because now, instead of risking, you know, an exalt for a T1 life roll, I'm risking 10C for a T3 life roll. So I went ahead and recombinated my life +1. And then this amulet also had +1 with life as well, T3 life as well. They both had T3 life. So what that means essentially is that because there's life on both of them, right, I don't have to craft anything. And because this is a talisman, I can't craft it even if I wanted to. So this is optimal. Now, so because this has T3 life, this has T3 life, and then one has the +1 all and one has the +1 fizz, right? The odds, if you go through the recombinator guide made by my good friend Iron, there's a 35% chance that the system actually ends up picking 3 prefixes, right? So because life can't be there twice, if it picks life, it'll automatically pick all skills and +1 fizz. If, of course, that's a 35% chance of happening. Now, there's also, I believe, a 50% chance of picking 2 stats. So it could pick +1 all and +1 fizz, in which case this would be profit. And you can pick +1 life and +1 all and +1 life on a non-corrupted base. That would also double my money. You can pick +1 life and +1 all and +1 life on the Black Maw Talisman. That would essentially be, I lost 10C in a recombinator, whatever, 20C. Or it could also pick essentially the +1 all and the life on the turquoise base, which would be ideal. That probably more than doubles my money. And then, of course, it could pick the +1 fizz and the life on the turquoise, which means I essentially lose, you know, an X. Or it could pick the +1 fizz and the +1 life on the Black Maw, which is also means I about lose an X, right? So looking at the math here, I've got a 35% chance at a very, very big jackpot. Now, this jackpot, the +2 with the life, if it goes on the Black Maw Talisman, probably sells for about 8X or so. Because the +2 with life is not that crazy expensive if you can't do anything else with it. If it goes to the turquoise amulet, however, that's to the A-gate amulet, it's very, very expensive. So let's go ahead and see what exactly happened. and I just decided to just kind of send it, and this is what we got. All right, so it picked the A-Gate Amulet, which is the best possible base. We kept the life, we kept the plus all, we kept the +1 fizz. So essentially, you could say I won the jackpot here, right? Now, unfortunately, which is a bit sad, my life actually downgraded to tier 4, which is the equivalent of crafted. If it had kept T3 or even potentially upgraded to T2, I probably would have been able to get a lot more out of this amulet. But in the current state of T4 +2, I sold that for 22x. So I started from a 1 Exalt base that I picked up in the map, a 10C Recombinator, and a 10C base for +1 fizz and T4 life or T3 life. I recombinated that and got 22 Exalts out of it, right? So this is why it's very important when you pick up items on the ground, especially now because of recombinators, that you pay attention to what's actually on the items, and of course you pay attention to, or you try to consider, what would this be good for, and is there any possibility of me to recombinate this? This is also why, you know, blue bases are selling for 3C each, right? People are actually interested in recombinating them. They'll essence spam them, then they'll recombinate them. They'll do the same until they get triple essences, and they'll make big profit from that. Of course, there's a possibility that at some point in this Sad to Chat series, I go into a recombinator portion where I make a bunch of money from recombinators or lose a bunch of money. At the end of the day, there is some gamble there. But that was a good chunk of our money, right? 22 Exalts from 1 Exalt, or maybe an Exalt and a half gambled. So yeah, this sold for 22x. Okay, next was the ring that I was talking about, and this is sort of the same situation. I dropped the core ring. Now most people would look at this core ring with fractured physical damage to attacks and go, well, it's a core ring, this garbage, right? And not only that, phys damage to attacks is not exactly meta. Absolutely true. Nothing to say about that, that's true. But you could consider, well, what sort of ring base would actually benefit from this physical damage to attacks? In this case, obviously, it would be a steel ring, right? A ring for actual physical attack builds. So the implicit and the explicit would actually stack together. The next thing that you go is like, okay, well, now what I'm going to do, if I can think of that, is, well, what is the cost of that actual base, right? Like, let's say I wanted to actually get that on a steel ring. How much is that worth? Or sorry, how much is that worth, period? So I saw that it was worth about 30C, right? So, you know, honestly, there's not that much value there. And then I look, well, what if I had this on a steel ring? And of course, I found some which were already crafted. So this is a little bit different because you'd have to spend the money to craft them. But I realized that there was a possibility for profit there. But then I was like, well, I'm not going to craft it because obviously that would require me to spend currency. So instead what I did is I figured out, well, what if I took another ring, a very cheap fractured on a steel ring, right, such as intelligence. What if I went with that? And I was able to buy T2 intelligence fractured, what is this called? Steel ring for 30 chaos. It was up for 5 days, right? So by having this 47 intelligence fracture, and by having the actual flat fizz fracture on my ring, I figured, look, I'm basically gambling 30 chaos for this steel ring, and then 30 chaos for the coal ring if I was to just sell it off to someone else. So I'm gambling a recombinator, which is 10C plus 60C. I'm gambling about half an X. What's my potential for profit? If it picks the steel ring and I get the fractured fizz on it, that alone is probably going to give me a couple X. Nothing crazy, but probably a couple X. If it picks the fizz, or sorry, if it picks the intelligence fracture, I basically lose my fizz fracture. Whatever, I just dump it in I just throw it away. I lost 0.5x, whatever, man, not a big deal. If anything goes to the core ring at the end of the day, if I end up with a core ring, that's also bricked, right? So I'm gambling potentially 0.5x, but my potential for return is, what if it picks the steel ring, which is a 50% chance, and then it picks my prefix fracture, which is an 83% chance, and then it picks my intelligence fracture, which is an 83% chance, right? So I have a 64% chance to keep both fractures and a 50% chance to keep the right base, which means at the end of the day, I've got about a 1 in 3, right? Right, 50, and 64, so let's just say about 1 in 3. So I've got about a 1 in 3 chance to get the right base with both fractures. And I'm gambling 0.5x, and my potential for return, if I was to spend maybe a couple Exalt crafting the ring, is probably around 8 to 10x. Or if I sell it as it stands, right, like this is probably worth about 4 or 5, as I said in the start of the video. So obviously that's a no-brainer. I've got a 1 in 3 chance to get an item which is going to be worth, 4 to 5x, and I'm spending 0.5, which means on average, if I was to do it 3 times, which is, guaranteed that I get the whole thing that I want, I'd have to spend 2.25x, 0.75 times 3, and I would get back 4 to 5. No brainer. I'm doubling my money. This is a good gamble, right? So I went ahead and did it, and of course, as you saw in my stash, I do have this ring currently, which means that clearly I actually went ahead and won this gamble. Now the question is, how did I actually maximize my odds of actually getting both fractures on the ring? And the way that I did that is by using essences. Now, the highest chance of actually keeping a fracture, be it a prefix or a suffix, if it's an individual modifier, is to get 2 prefixes. Let's say you're trying to get a prefix fractured on another item, is to get 2 prefixes which are going to match on both the item, and same thing for suffixes. So if you have 1 fractured suffix, you want to have 2 matching suffixes. Now, the reason for that is because in a 5 mod pool, you have a 50% chance for the game to choose 3 mods. If it picks 3 mods and you have 2 matching prefixes, let's say there's fractured fizz, and then you have life, and mana, it can't pick life and life twice, and it can't pick mana and mana twice. So in the 50% chance that it picks all 3 prefixes, right, well, it's guaranteed to give you the fractured mod. So that's 50% chance to win right there. And then there's also a chance that it picks, I believe, 2 modifiers, which is also, I think, 50% chance. And if you do the math on that, you end up with roughly 33% chance of keeping the fractured modifier, because you have 3 modifiers. It can't pick any of them twice, so you can pick the good mod and a bad mod, the good mod and a bad mod, and then of course the bad mod and a bad mod. So 1 in 3 chance on top of 50%, right? So that's kind of where we get the math from that. So that's essentially what I did. Now I did win that 1 in 3, which you can call me lucky. I definitely was a little bit with yesterday's crafting recombinator shenanigans, but that's what I did. I used some essences in order to basically lock in a suffix or a prefix, and I just spammed some very, very cheap essences until I got some matching prefixes and some matching suffixes, which you can also, of course, help by using a benchcraft. So let's say this one is life, and then cold and fire res, and this one is life. This one mana, cold and fire res. You craft life on this, you craft mana on this, and essentially you'd have the matching both prefixes and both suffixes. So it's very easy to set up using very cheap essences. So that's kind of how I went ahead and went from essentially a 3x an hour to upwards of 7x an hour so far in the project. Now, again, this puts us at around the 55 exalt mark on the project, which means that we are very close to closing in on a Headhunter. That should be done basically today, as long as there's no incredibly bad RNG. As long as we have some pretty average luck, we should be done with, say, a Headhunter today. And then we're probably going to buy Headhunter, and then we are going to use that Headhunter to make a new build to be able to farm the same strategy more efficiently, so I can prove to you guys that you can actually make a lot of money just from farming, some regular maps, with as long as your build is actually made to do so, because my build right now is just absolutely not made to run this content. But it still does it just fine, and in terms of this level of budget, there's not many builds that'll be able to do it anyways. So that's pretty much it for the second episode of From Sad to Chad. Hopefully this was informative. I really do think that you guys should consider switching to a filter where you can, show these like 3C bases so you could sell them off. And I also really think that you should definitely focus on those fractured items, or there's just those blue items on the ground, or those rare items. Pick them up, check them out, and try to consider, what could I do with this in order to actually maximize its value. But before I go, as always, I do want to say a massive thank you to my supporters: Jaden and Rocky, Max, Solmok, Exo, Miss, Riscoil, Thomas, Mass, and Nate, The Great Master, Alex, Tim, Mercury, Bert, Kai, Nailed, Jarvis, Joven, Bitizen, Vaith, Talsmar, Endodurgo 99, Sins Eater, as well as anybody else who supported me in the past and anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous. That'll be Matthew signing out. Until next one, peace.